Okay.
Hi there, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me okay. This is Scott Boback. I am Associate Professor and Chair of the Biology Department, and going to talk to you a little bit today about a new project that my lab is doing that has to do with rattlesnakes in Colorado. And so we're going to talk a little bit about climate change, hibernation, and rattlesnakes. So, and I think I should mention that if you have any questions, you can put those at the somewhere on the system, and I can see them. Okay. All right. So, going to give you a little bit of an outline of what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to give you a little bit of background on rattlesnake biology. Those of you that don't know about rattlesnakes. And then I'm going to give you some information on the objectives that I had for this study. Now, the study is just relatively new, so we had some modest objectives for the first 2 years. First thing is I wanted to characterize some behaviors of snakes at dens. And in order to do that, I'm going to give you a little bit of background on my study site and where this den is located. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about the second objective, identifying unknown den locations using a procedure called radiotelemetry. Some of you may have heard about this before. If not, we'll go over that. Using that same methodology, radiotelemetry, I wanted to talk about sort of the snake migration, how the snakes are moving around on the landscape. And then lastly, looking at novel den locations to see if we could identify locations of where snakes are going to overwinter that we did not know about previously. I'm going to finish up the webinar with talking a little bit about a new direction that I'm going to be working on with my collaborators using ground penetrating radar. Okay, so a little bit of background on rattlesnake biology. This is a picture, by the way, of a rattlesnake, one of my study subjects, a male that I captured back in 2017. So rattlesnakes have behaviors that are come about in different parts of their time throughout the year. So in the wintertime, many snakes, not just rattlesnakes, they hibernate. And they hibernate in these communal dens. Communal meaning that there's a large number of snakes in these dens, sometimes over 100 individuals. In the summertime, snakes will migrate away from the den to what we would consider to be their summer range or their summer foraging areas. And this is where they would eat, find food to eat, find prey items, and undergo a lot of growth. And they also do some mating as well in some of these areas. And then in the fall, all those animals would return back to the den to overwinter. So clearly the snakes have to be able to locate the den and find the den when it is appropriate. Well, one of the concerns is that snakes that are found outside of the den when it's very, very cold are susceptible to getting killed. So they tend to move back to the den before they actually have to go into the den. And so they spend a lot of time around the outside of the den. And I'm going to talk about that today. Lastly, Pregnant females do not migrate. They only come out a very short distance from the den, areas that I found less than about 200 meters or so from the den, and they give birth in a protected area that other biologists have called a rookery or a maternal den. The babies are reared there, and then those offspring only have to go a very short distance back to the den, and that may be one of the reasons why they do that so close to the main den. So this is my study site. It's in northwestern Colorado, and in this area, if you can see my cursor, there is on this site is a little peak, not this big one in the back, but a little peak here, and that is a small hill, and I've got just zoomed in so you can see a picture. Even if you couldn't see my cursor, you should be able to see this now. This is a butte, which is basically a hillside in some of these areas that is very rocky and has a bunch of shale around the outside. This is called Rattlesnake Butte, and on that butte is the location of these dens. This butte is really interesting because it is the elevation's pretty high. It's at 7,000 feet, over 7,000 feet, which, to my knowledge, is one of the highest dens that will potentially have been studied. The composition of the rocks is really important for presumably for the formation of these dens where the snakes overwinter, because those rocks are resistant to erosion. And so presumably the snakes are accessing and utilizing these areas, which is really kind of an interesting intersection between geology and ecology. This butte is something that's called an igneous dike. And what that means is that it's actually made from what used to be magma, or the hot lava that came out of a volcano. So you can see on the left-hand side of the screen is sort of the red magma. That's when a volcano is active. On the right-hand side is the black stuff, which is after the magma has cooled and turned back into rock. You can see that's called Pluton, and those areas over there are sort of in maintaining those same locations that they once did when it was an active volcano, but now has this really unique rock that was made out of magma. That's called igneous rock. And some of these areas, excuse me, continue to be persistent. And we believe as then the rest of the area around it erode, some of these areas become exposed, like that dike down there. So we think that that's what's going on the site. This is an example of the entrance to the den. Now, if you can see my cursor, I'm gonna highlight, this is the location where is the opening to that this den entrance. And these are all rocks that are sort of like piled up on the side. The snakes would come out of here and then they sort of bask in this area out in front. I'll give you an example of another one here. This is another opening to that same den. And this looks a little bit different, but about the same. There are some flat areas where the snakes can sort of access the den openings. And what happens is these snakes will come out, they'll bask in front of the den openings in order to thermoregulate, right? Increase their body temperature, because these animals are ectotherms, meaning that the environment determines their body temperature. And so they need to bask in order to raise their body temperature and do their daily processes. So what I did for part of this is one of my first objectives, is to characterize the behavior outside of the den. So I want to know what's going on with those snakes outside of the den. And so I can't be there in Colorado 365 days a year. So I set up cameras to take photographs of the snakes as they bask out in front of the dens. And so if this den, you can see that there's on the left-hand side, there's an image of a camera up there on the right, and it's projecting down, and there's a den right in the center of the screen. You can't really see it in the photograph, but it's right in the center of the screen. There's a couple of openings there, and the snakes will be basking out in front. And so I can kind of see the snakes coming and going, and then as they're lying out in front. On the right-hand side, I've blown up the cameras so you can see those a little bit easier. The cameras are mounted on a plywood back that is covered with some reflective material, some insulation. That's to kind of protect those cameras from the harsh sun that is characteristic of a Colorado summertime. Can be really, really intense solar radiation. And so that's to protect the cameras a little bit from exposure to the sun. So I set up these cameras, and the cameras are set to take photographs of the outside of the den, and these would be in a time lapse. So I can set it to take pictures at a certain interval. And what I would get is something like this. So this is an example of a image that's downloaded from my camera. By the way, the cameras run year round. So I go out to Colorado periodically and download all of these images. But this is what it looks like. It can take a picture. It has a date and time stamp, some other information about the temperature and the moon phase. And so this is kind of right at that entrance that I just showed you. It's a little bit different perspective so that I can kind of see right in front of the den. But you can see that there's really no snakes out, but quickly the snakes come out and bask in front of the den. And so what I'm interested in is, when are the snakes basking in front of the den? So how long are they doing this, and what are they doing? So what I did is I took all these data and I counted all the snakes and then plotted that on time. And what you can see here is a frequency distribution of all the numbers of snakes that I have counted out in front of this one entrance. And you can see there's a bulk of activity that happens in May. But the important point of this is to basically show you that the snakes are there coming out late in April, and they'll stay there all the way into June. And then finally they will leave the den. So what that means is that most of the year, the snakes are sleeping. That's a very important thing in terms of the changing of the Earth's climate. And as the weather warms, this could significantly impact the way that they bask. Another thing that I've done out there is, this is in collaboration with Ben Edwards and the Earth Science Department, is we have done some work to take photographs of the study site. So I'm running a video of us, actually Ben's doing the running of the drone that's taking photographs of the study site. So we launched this thing up, and it's got it's pre-programmed, and it can generate a whole bunch of pictures. And you take all those pictures together, stitch them together. That's photogrammetry. And what I can do is I can generate this thing. This is what's called a digital elevation model. And I'm just going to show you that this is all in 3 dimensions. This is all created based on those photographs. And so I can create this 3-dimensional model. This allows us to more precisely sort of see the butte. Now here it is. I've zoomed in a little bit on a photograph of the top of the butte, and what we were able to show is that it's got some really interesting structure. And if you zoom in, what I can show is that there were a number of different sites in which there were den openings. So I knew this, and then eventually discovered that there were a whole bunch of other openings to the same den. This is something I did not know. So the second part of the study is that I wanted to try to figure out where the snakes were moving. And as you can see here, this is the study site again. I'm going to place I'm going to capture snakes, but that's the location of the den there on this Rattlesnake Butte. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to confirm that all the snakes that were out and about in this area were going back to the same den location. And the reason why that is because this is actually a sort of an applied research project in which I'm working with a landowner. This is a private ranch. And I'm working with the landowner to try to figure out where the snakes are, how to work and live with snakes. And so we wanted to know whether they're going back to that location. Well, in order to do that, I captured snakes all around the study site that were outside and near the den location. Then I took those and I brought them into the lab and I inserted radio transmitters into 10 snakes. So you knock them out with anesthetic, you perform surgery, you put these radios in there, and then sew them back up and then release them. And then I can track those snakes. I can find out where they go. And that is something that I have to do year round. Here's me in March, and not a lot of snakes are out when it's snowing, but they were still there. They were still up in their dens, and you know, I have to go there to sort of confirm where they are, if they've moved around in their den, did they do any movement over the wintertime, that kind of thing. So I check that, and I can generate locations for where the snakes are. Now, what I've put here on this Google Earth image is just all of the locations where I captured snakes. And I know that the words are kind of overlapping some of those flags, but this is just another image of that same data that I showed you, which is where those snakes were captured. And then I followed them. And here's the second image, is to show you that some of those snakes went way, way, way up. Here's the butte down here. Some of these snakes went way up here. As a matter of fact, this snake actually went even further, almost off the screen. Some of these snakes that we're finding are traveling over 3 kilometers, which is quite a feat for a rattlesnake. But an interesting thing that we learned from the radio telemetry is if there were any different den locations that we didn't know about. So what I plotted on here is, you can see the den location, and then we have the capture location for snake number 4, and then here's where that snake moved to. And what we realized is that there was a brand new location, which I don't have time to tell you about today, but it's right here on this other butte, and is informing us as to how to manage this population. So last thing I'm going to mention is just that we're going to, my colleagues and I, this is Jordan Hayes with the Earth Science Department, and Ben Edwards and I are going to be working on a project looking at what is going on underground for these locations where the snakes are hibernating. They go into these dens and live underneath there. What's going on? And so one of the ways we can do that is with this thing called ground penetrating radar. And what that does is that sends this radar under the ground. It bounces off of different objects, including areas that might have air spaces in there, and then come back up, and we can receive that, and we can basically create an image of this stuff underground and try to figure out where these guys are hibernating and what is necessary for them to hibernate successfully. Does this go really, really far? Does it go super far? Does it stop relatively short? One of the things I didn't mention is that I did have a camera, a fiber optic camera that I sent down the dens, and I went as far as I could go, which was 2 meters, and it just keeps going. So we know that they go relatively deep, but we don't know how deep they go. So that's it. I just wanted to mention thank you to my collaborators, Jordan Hayes, Ben Edwards, and Bob Reed, for all their help and moving forward on this. Again, this is a brand new project, so we're excited to see what happens in the future. So does anybody have any questions? We'd be happy to entertain those if you want. I think there's a little box that you can ask questions. And so we'll hang around a little bit and see if there's any questions. If there's not, thanks for listening. And I guess if you have any questions that you think about later, you can email me. Oh, looks like there is one question that popped up. How does climate change affect these animals? Yeah, so I kind of glossed over that. So if you think about the increase in global temperatures, what that means is that on average, the air temperature should be warmer. And part of the success of a rattlesnake is to get out of the environment when it's very cold. And so they actually need the temperature to drop dramatically in order for them to save energy. And so they'll actually go into these dens to avoid these kind of cold conditions. But you could imagine if the temperature outside is warmer, maybe they could extend their active season a little bit, but at the same time, the weather may be unpredictable. And unpredictable weather is never a good thing for an animal that relies on warm temperatures in order to exist. And so the challenges with dealing with climate change are multi-fold. They're going to be warmer temperatures, and so potentially could cost them some energy. And then two could be the extremes that happen. There's one other question. How long do the rattlesnakes live? That's a great question. Some of the rattlesnakes, we believe, live up to 20 years of age. For this particular population, we don't know the total longevity of those individuals. We'll only know over time. One of the things that's true about snakes is you cannot age a snake very well. So other animals, you can kind of catch them and you can predict their age. It's challenging to do that for a snake. Another question came in from Ken Lacey. Mortality changes with climate change. Absolutely, there are definitely changes to mortality with climate change. Again, these animals need to essentially go out in the summertime, eat and mate and do all of their activity in a very short window, and then come back over winter. And when they overwinter, they're going to try to conserve as much of that energy as they can, so that when they come out of hibernation, they're going to be capable of doing these other things, like eating again and mating and also giving birth. And if there is a warming of the temperatures, this could potentially impact the energy budget of the snake during the wintertime, causing them to actually use up some energy, and then could potentially cause mortality and cause some snakes to die. We did actually see, just as a note, I did see on my cameras, really kind of interesting, that there were some snakes that came out of the den in December and were crawling across the snow. Those snakes, you can see on the image, I'll have to put that in the next webinar. You could see the snakes were kind of skinny, so they were thin and not doing very well. So we don't know quite what's going on there, but to keep answering these questions? Yeah. Okay. So another question came in, about 5 more minutes for questions. Another question came in, apparently from an old colleague of mine, not an old colleague of mine, but a colleague from previous years, Brian Roll. He asks, what are the management applications for the ranch and living with the snakes? So that's a great question. So this ranch is a private ranch, about almost 500 acres. and the individuals on the ranch are not very fond of the snakes, but they recognize the value of all of the organisms that inhabit their ranch. And so what I'm attempting to do is try to give them an understanding of what the snakes are doing, when the snakes are doing different things, how they're moving, and so that they can kind of understand a little bit more about what are the main migration areas, what are the main feeding areas, in a way to try to let them know that these guys are really important to the ecosystem. And even if they tried to kill all of these snakes, they would probably come back. As a matter of fact, this population has been persecuted for years and years and years, and it's still persistent. The gestation, Jace Wagner asked the gestation period and how are newborns fed if born in the hibernation period. So first, to clarify that the newborns are born after the females come out of hibernation. So as soon as the females come out of hibernation, they just migrate these short distances, and then they actually continue to thermoregulate. They bask all summer without eating. So they don't eat anything at all. They come out of hibernation, don't eat anything, and just incubate the offspring that are developing in their bodies, and then they give birth late in the summer. And so I've seen these locations, and I've documented the locations of these rookeries where the offspring have come out, and they actually stick around the mother. The mothers of these rattlesnakes actually exhibit some parental care. One of the few species of snakes that exhibit parental care is some of these rattlesnakes. And so they actually stick around and defend those offspring. There's one more question. Have you given the snakes names or numbers? So I have not named them, but they definitely all have numbers that I keep track of, and I hope to learn a lot about them in the coming years. You do become pretty intimate with the snakes. Finding them multiple times throughout the year and seeing how they're doing, and it's really kind of interesting to learn more about them. So thanks everybody for listening, and hope you enjoyed it.